So yeah, thank you for the introduction. My name is Jan Bauer. I am, as you say, clinical nurse specialist in neuro-oncology. So I cover Hywel Dda Health Board, so the counties of Ceredigion, Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire. But I work with the team in Cardiff out the Heath, and I work with the team in Singleton as well for oncology. So this is just to give us a little bit of structure so I don't go off on too much of a tangent. We're going to talk about the speciality because it is a very niche area of work in neuro-oncology. Understanding what our patients' needs are and the challenges that we see in practice and the challenges from the patient's perspectives as well. How we respond to the need of the patients, how we as a service have adapted to support them. The issue of rurality is huge. That is one of the main things that we're all here to talk about today, but for this patient group, it is a real challenge. The impacts that we see it having on patients and some case studies, and then also just to wrap things up, how we've adapted to the needs of the patient group. So to introduce the speciality, if you don't know, do you know much about brain tumours or hear the patient's experience a little bit? Yeah, so we know that they are one of the biggest cancer killers of children and young adults over 40. They are rare cancer diagnosis, so the numbers are small nationally and also locally. Over 12,000 people are diagnosed per year, and roughly 5,500 people, come into those death statistics for this disease group every year. So it's a cancer group that faces real challenges. But there are a lot of people living as well with the effects of this diagnosis, particularly in the lower grade groups that are often really misunderstood and not represented in the service provision. It's how can we capture and support the needs of all the patients affected. That's a really stark statistic there, just over 12% of adults 5 years after diagnosis, and we're talking about the highest grade brain tumour here. Research really offers us the only hope. We have such a small number of drugs that we can give to our patients, roughly 5 drugs that we can give that have been NICE approved, more in development, and there is lots of work going on, but the only way that we are going to get any movement in treating this really debilitating and difficult diagnosis is through getting more funding coming through the research pathways to develop drugs, to see us fall more into line with some of the other bigger disease groups. There's opportunities for things like immunotherapies, gene therapies. There's lots of stuff rumbling on in the background, but it needs to be translated into practice and into bigger clinical trials. So there's so much work that needs to be done. In South Wales, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Have I just been talking with that slide? Because I wasn't looking up there. At least I didn't lose you all completely. Let's hope. So more on there then. Yeah. Okay, right. Someone tell me if they don't move this time, okay? So I think we just need to go back one slide. Going forward now. Oh yeah, no, it's okay. I can see where we are. Tell me, is that same South Wales incidence? Yes. Yes, awesome. Okay. So as I said, I sit as part of the MDT that comes out for Heath and Cardiff. So we see approximately 35 to 40 new patients, or 35 to 40 patients within that MDT on a Monday morning every week. So for us in the South West Wales Cancer Centre, which is based out of Singleton Oncology, we'll see a handful of new patients. In the Hywel Dda Health Board, it's a couple of months, really. Our numbers are low, but they're low but very complex, thankfully. Otherwise, I would have no time in a week. The amount of work that goes into just bringing one new patient through the pathway, it's really intensive work because they come with really complex problems. Some of these patients will come to us who will have really advanced disease, be in an older age group and have a performance data. So we really need to consider that sensitively when we talk to them about treatment, because the treatment that we offer is very intensive training to treat. Not in a curative, we never talk about curative in this disease group, but we talk about how we can give people the most amount of time with their family. So we are talking surgery and radiotherapy if we can, chemo, sometimes some palliative forces of radiotherapy. Prognosis, as it says there, for some patients, depending on the histology, if they're lower grade, we might be talking of decades of stable disease. But we know a lot of these patients will recur with a higher grade point further down the line. For glioblastomas, which are the most aggressive, without treatment, we'd be talking about perhaps just a couple of months, sometimes less, without any kind of treatment at all. Even with treatment, we're talking about a year to 18 months, and that's with aggressive treatment. But again, everybody is different. And this is what I talk about to my patients and my families, is that we talk about numbers, but they're numbers. The person will have a very different experience, and some people survive longer and some people survive for less time. Oh, are we moving demographics? Yes. So within Hywel Dda Health Board, it's generally quite widespread across the health board. I've got patients at the moment who are actually bordering Powys in the north. So, for example, for that gentleman who's just transitioning into palliative care, I have to source the palliative care out of Powys. So that is their palliative care nurses are based out of Newtown and Welshpool. So for someone who works in Hywel Dda, that is like navigating a totally different workforce of people that I don't know. So that presents challenges in itself. And then all the way down to St David's, all the way down to Pembroke, and then across to Ammanford. So it's really widespread. Within Hywel Dda, Carmarthenshire has the highest incidence, as you would imagine, because it's got our highly populated towns of Carmarthen, Llanelli, Ammanford, as I say. And there are pockets of patients in certain areas. So interestingly, just north of Aberystwyth, I've got 3 patients living in the same street. You know, that's quite, considering such a rare tumour group, that's very interesting. You have to think, why are there so many patients there? In Ammanford, there are so many patients in the Ammanford area, to the point where it's almost like as people come through the MDT, we're like, oh, it's another patient from Ammanford. Again, this is a rare disease group. So when we see things like this, we notice it. And there's been research done abroad that links brain tumour incidence to mining, coal mining. And of course, these are, Ammanford in particular has got a strong mining heritage. So there's interesting things that we pick up as we move through. It spreads across all of the age groups. So we do obviously see lots of people in the older age groups because we know you're more likely to get cancer as you get older. But, we see a large proportion of the patients I look after in their 30s and their 40s, supporting families with young children, having to work out how to get their children to school, how to work out how to, exist and know themselves, who they are as human beings. All of that gets challenged by this diagnosis. So that challenge of rurality is really stark in this patient group. And A&E is the usual place where they're diagnosed. 90% is the national figure, and it's reflected in Hywel Dda Health Board as well. I've looked at the people who've come through their diagnostic pathway, and it is around about 90% are diagnosed in A&E after having a critical incident, stroke-like symptoms, massive seizure, falls, changes in personality that have got families going, what's going on here, and taking people into A&E. There's only a couple of incidents where people have gone back and forward to the GP. It's mostly literally an overnight change. And in that moment, that person's life is completely altered. It's like the rug is pulled out from underneath them. They go into A&E and they come out of it knowing that they've got a lesion in their brain. Let's see if I can move this slide on without causing any problems. Yes, good. So to understand the service design is where we start when we think about how we can improve things. So we've talked a little bit about the people that we're supporting. Over on this top side, you can see these are our highest grade brain tumours, but we also support some of the lower grades. And then there's another group which will come through our MDT, but I don't really look at these lymphomas. paediatric tumours, they have their own teams that look after them. Most of my work is done with this group here, the higher grade. They are the most complex, and they're the people that need the most support as they transition through the pathway, sometimes very rapidly through the pathway. So the patient journey, patients are typically diagnosed, as I say, in A&E. This is generally in their district general hospitals, but also when we talk about rurality, it's also important to remember that that patient's A&E department might still be an hour away from where they live. So we're talking long distances and an extremely stressful situation that people are travelling from the get-go. MDT is in Cardiff, so they're all discussed at the MDT in Cardiff. If neurosurgery is an option, they're operated in Cardiff. Oncologists are based in Swansea. Radiotherapy is based in Swansea and Singleton Hospital. If they have specialist rehab needs, that's in Port Talbot. And then any ongoing treatment is done. So ongoing chemo is in their district general hospital, and that's outside of all of the community care-based care that they need. So we are talking a lot of different hospitals, a lot of different sites, a lot of time on road, and a lot of different health professionals involved here. And as a result, patients really face challenges with this, not just from the diagnosis, but all of this stuff is really representative of the challenges that patients face. Financial, we know that it's hard to work anyway when you're going through cancer treatments, but those in rural communities face this tenfold, often self-employed, might be working in farming or agriculture, might have family businesses. Not working might not be an option for some people. Getting to appointments, the time on the road, the intensity of treatment. Radiotherapy is 6 weeks every day in Singleton. So some of my patients will travel from Aberystwyth down to Swansea every day for 6 weeks and go back and do that every weekday apart from weekends. They're often isolated as a result from the people who they need the most, their family support systems, who might not be able to travel with them because they're the people who are holding up the fort, so to speak. And this person has had to go in hospital transport first thing in the morning, travel down and come back. And sometimes that's just for an appointment. That's for an appointment that might be half an hour review with an oncologist and go back, regardless of treatment. We know that I am sure you're all aware of the challenges of social support and care packages in rural communities. These patients need care and support, and we see people really struggling, families struggling to plug the gap and care for their loved ones when they would really benefit from having access to carers who can come and support them. But care packages are very thin on the ground in rural communities. So I spend a lot of time working with people like CRT teams, ART teams, who really just go in and have to crisis manage some of these situations. And the symptoms that people experience are complex. Headache, pain, seizures, and the fear of seizures, huge, particularly when you think in rural communities where it can take an ambulance hours to get somewhere. And that's if you've got the ambulance able to go straight away. You've got someone at home having a massive seizure, family distress, fear, young children perhaps witnessing that. So they're real challenges that we have to manage. And survivorship, we touched on that low grade group of patients. There's the survivorship in that group of patients is often really misunderstood. They face the same challenges, but they have a different level of sort of emphasis on their journey. People will naturally think about the experience of the patient who might be quickly transitioning to palliative care, who has a shorter prognosis. Yet this patient group with a lower grade tumour will face challenges of their own, as in how do we live? How do I function knowing that I've got this low grade tumour? How do I go back to work despite the fact that cognitively I don't feel like the same person? So yeah, rurality. We have talked about it, but just to demonstrate like the distances there are vast. We know that also these roads are not easy roads to travel. I go and see patients at home, and some of the some of the journeys I've had have been very ropey. So yeah, it's not just about the A to B journey, is it? It's about what happens in between all the higgledy-piggledy, windy lanes, endless traffic lights, floods, weather, that add to those challenges. But you know, when you think that people will go nearly 3 hours straight to the heath from some areas in the health board, and I'm sure some of you perhaps from North Wales even, they've faced their own challenges as well with accessing care that's further over. So my professional challenges are also reflective of the areas that we work in. Ability to refer is a big challenge for me, because I cover 3 counties within the same health board, but work with endless hospitals. And as I mentioned, sometimes I have to sort out palliative care that come from areas that I don't even know how to access palliative care. And I'm ringing GPs and saying, do you think you can give me a name of a nurse I can speak to who might be able to help? So it's a lot of working out where people belong or fit in the system. Doing referrals, sometimes you don't hear back, so you don't get acknowledgement that you've done the referral. You just have to right, that this person is going to get picked up, and you have to do a lot of the chasing. And there are differences and disparities, never mind between health boards. There are differences and disparities within health boards. And when we think about rurality in Wales, I think we need to be thinking about the service. Everybody should be getting the same deal wherever they live. Prudent service management, you know, I talk about the challenges of getting patients through services, but I also understand the pressures. Service managers are having to really think about how they give resources and where they give resources to. They're having to really vet the referrals that come through. It's a hard world that we work in now in healthcare, where people are having to make tough decisions. So I guess what I'm saying is I get it. I see it from both sides, but obviously we just want the best for people that we care for. We've already talked about the shortage of carers and care managers. So what did we want to do about some of these challenges? We wanted firstly to understand the experience of the patients. We undertook a small, it was a small study. It was just to try and understand what the experience of the patients is who are travelling and coming down to Singleton to see consultants to have radiotherapy to go through their treatment pathway. We started off by doing a survey to get this sort of just some basic data that we could work with. And those are our aims. We wanted to really understand the experience of rurality. We wanted to understand the patient experience. We wanted to see how we could adapt the work that we're doing, how we could get some information that would help us to say, we need to do this better, we need to do this differently. So the results were I grouped them into a couple of themes. Travelling to appointments. I'm sure you're not surprised that people are spending a lot of time on the road and that this has a huge impact on their lives. You know, the majority of patients said they were travelling 1 to 2 hours one way. So they're also then spending loads of time in the hospital, clinics running late, they're seeing the doctor, then they're spending 1 to 2 hours travelling back. This time of the year, they're probably leaving the house in darkness, they're getting home in darkness, and that's how they're spending their day. If they're on treatment, that's going to be the same thing every day through sometimes difficult winter months. And it takes its toll. It really takes its toll on people. 71% rely on friends and family to take them. Bear in mind, this disease group have their driving licence taken away from them. You know, the minute you're diagnosed with a brain tumour, they take your driving licence away. Sometimes 2 years, sometimes they never get it back. The impact in a rural community of losing your driving licence is huge. And 14% always find it difficult to get someone to take them. We do have hospital transport, but it is not for everyone. Hospital transport is great, but there are also some real downsides, and lots of people would prefer to rely on friends and family. This patient group do not have access to the hostel in Singleton Hospital because they carry a seizure risk with their diagnosis, and they have to be completely independent, spend time in the hospital. So they cannot rely on accommodation unless they self-fund it, and there's financial implications. Telephone appointments. So if I summarise this, it's basically that patients want to see more of it. We think that patients want to see us, think people want to see us in person, but actually we can do so much virtually. We can do so much over the phone. We can do so much by using platforms like Attend Anywhere, Microsoft Teams, all of this stuff, the work that happened in COVID, we need to use it now. Yes, we cannot take away from the magic that comes from being in a room with a patient, the connection that we get from being in the same space. But when you take into account the distances people have to travel, they do value having the opportunity to pick out what works best for them. And for a quarter of an hour long-term review of how they're doing when a patient is well, travelling 2 hours one way, travelling 2 hours back, we can do that virtually, and the patient it doesn't change their experience. They want the choice, and the choice, I think, is the key thing. Home visits. Okay. So as you can see, I'm in uniform today. I was going to come in civvies, but I am in uniform because when I finish this, I will go and see patients in their own home down in Llanelli. So this is what I do. I go and see patients in their own homes. This is quite a unique part of the work that I do, and we wanted to also understand whether patients value this. We know that they do. The number that's saying there that they have been seen is only because we looked at some of the lower grade patients in follow-up as well. So some of them don't get seen by me at home because they don't need it in truth. It's the more complex patients that I tend to go and see, but they value it. And I'll tell you more about why and where it's been helpful further on. But it does make a difference. And we know that it's a different way of delivering care. For a CNS working in oncology, we know that nurses go and see people in communities, but it is quite unique in the type of work that I do. So I'll just touch on a little bit of the experience. This is one of my patients who shares this with her consent. She knows that it's information she's given that is going to be shared. She wanted to really show the experience for her. She lives out in West Wales, in a small town, but she's also lived in rural Scotland. So she's got two lenses on this experience of rurality. She's not faulting the care. She's happy with the care that she's received. It's all of the intricacies that come with trying to get her care, trying to get to appointments, trying to navigate her way through. The fact that she depends on other people to get to her appointments, the fact that she has to travel such a long way. But she feels that, and I think I've just got it in the next slide here. Oh gosh, I'm really sorry. Right, okay, I'm gonna skip one because I haven't even talked about service development. I'm so sorry, I do rattle on. Basically, her experience, she values the care, she values the adaptations that are being made to deliver her care close to home, but she also really wanted to share that for her it is a challenge, and her experience is probably really reflective. So this is how we've developed. We've taken that data, we've applied it to practice. We've used it to adapt the clinic structure. So we now offer hybrid clinics where we have options for all of the above, basically in-person, video calls, telephone reviews, me going out and see patients rather than them coming into clinic. So we've done our best to kind of offer every option that we possibly can. I also VC into the Singleton clinic, so I don't go in person. I will be there on a little screen like this in the background, doing the same consultation as my patients in their oncology clinic. I'm also based in the community, so I can see all of my patients. So we keep that continuity of care. We've improved therapies access. We've developed clearer patient pathways. The home visits are completely embedded into service. We've trained GPs, so we've worked with GPs to try and strengthen that community provision. And we've developed more digital resources. Digital resources have pluses and minuses in my book, but the technology is there, and we're doing our best to use it. And we're developing long-term follow-up services. And just to touch on the home visits, this is, as I say, a really unique role. I am, as far as I'm aware, and I'm pretty sure this is accurate, I'm the only nurse working in neuro-oncology who does this nationally, not just in Wales, but across the whole of the UK. There are so many benefits. I cannot even begin to tell you how many benefits there are from going to see a patient in their own home when their whole situation is so complicated. And just to touch on some of the things that I have been able to do, I will go out and deliver bad news to people. I will tell them that their scans have progressed and save them the experience of sitting in a clinical setting, hearing that, and then having to walk out through a waiting room in front of other people. I can do that with all of their family around them. I've been with people when they've died in their last moments of life and supported their children to say goodbye to them. I have gone and helped people plan their end of life care, but I've also gone and done pre-treatment assessments. I've gone and channel. Using my words, I'm trying to go too fast now. But I've gone and challenged decisions that have been made by the MDT, who have perhaps said, "Oh no, this patient isn't fit enough for surgery." So I've gone and seen that patient and taken them back to MDT and said, "You've got this wrong. This patient is fit enough. Come through our pathway." So there are so many valuable things that come from seeing where a person lives in our communities, and how we can develop that insight and take it back into practice. And like I said, it just is a positive experience, not just for the patient. There's a nurse who really cares about the patient. It's a really positive experience for me as a professional as well. So I've only got 2 slides left. So yeah, patients report they really appreciate the efforts that we're trying to make, and we've got so much work in progress. So there's so much more to do. I think it's important. We've talked about lots of challenges. There is so much good from living in some of our rural communities. Community is strong. Charities are amazing. I depend on so many of these small charities. Charities that will come and walk people's dogs, charities that will go and do someone's shopping. It's only through knowing your communities that you discover that. So we can talk about the big shiny services, but these tiny little people who are just doing good work, they are such an important part of the care that we give in health service, and we need to celebrate the strength that comes from small little villages, small communities, I just see so much good in that. And the changes that we're trying to do are just welcomed by all of the patients. They know we're trying our best in a really difficult situation. So yeah, rurality is a significant challenge. We know that people are travelling long distance. They value having more options for accessing care. The development is ongoing. And the question that I pose then is, how can we continue to bridge the gap between the specialist services, because we are a specialist service, we're really niche, very specific, but how can we continue to bridge that gap to bring it closer to our patients? So thank you. You're going to be like, well, John, you've got 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Jan. If anyone has got any questions, obviously feel free to ask.
All right, well, let's try it. Let's see how we go. So, Pranam Da, everyone. Thank you for coaxing up all the way through the rain and up the stairs to come in and see me in my presentation today, and for everyone online. Really appreciate you coming to hear a little bit about the project that I'm going to speak to you today about. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Kainwen. I'm a speech and language therapist at Paris Teaching Health Board. And today I'm going to outline a recent project I undertook, which provided drama and movement workshops in the community setting for people with communication difficulties secondary to a neurological condition. And what this project was aiming to do was to set out to answer these questions. These are the questions that we set ourselves with this project. We received funding from the Arts Council of Wales and the Paris Teaching Health Board charity to support us to deliver and enable us to run this project. So what we were looking for was do drama and movement workshops, provide a naturalistic setting to support carryover of speech and language skills that we're teaching in therapy. So does it provide that environment to do that? Does it increase confidence for people with communication difficulties to communicate in real life situations with others? Is it engaging participants in social activities? Does it increase feelings of well-being?
Does it reduce feelings of anxiety and depression, if applicable to those clients? Because what we know is that people with communication difficulties are at significantly higher risk of depression and anxiety than the general population. And does it increase interest in the arts? And that was a pivotal question, you know, as most of the funding did come from Arts Council of Wales. So we were also seeking to look at that wider benefit. So this was the project brief that we set out to our arts partners. So I approached 2 local Powys-based arts organisations. So Shakespeare Link is a drama, community drama theatre group based in Ryder and just up the road. And Gemma Thomas is a dance practitioner from Bilth Wells. And they were approached because they both had really strong community projects, community-based arts projects that they deliver. And so what we set them as a project brief was to develop 8 drama workshops. So that would be running 2 sets of 4 weekly workshops, one in North Powys, which was based in Newtown, and one in South Powys, which was based in Brecon. And then one block of 3 movement workshops, which again was based in Brecon in the south. This was a test, it was a pilot. We weren't able to do everything we wanted to do, so we chose the localities that we thought would best be able to help us deliver on this project. And as said before, it was for adults with communication difficulties secondary to a neurological condition. It was a pretty broad brief. So what I've got for you now is a 10-minute video which will outline much of an overview of the project, how it was implemented and how it was received by the participants. And fingers crossed this is going to work. It's quite a big file. If it gets too glitchy, we might have to look at a plan B, but let's see how we do. What I will suggest, and this unfortunately will probably disadvantage those that are online, is I've got a video that I can play on my own device. So online will be able to hear the sounds, but perhaps not see the visuals. So I apologise about that. I think that might be the best way forward right now, unless you have any other ideas.
No, you go for it, Sunday.
Okay, and I can hear an echo. Is that myself?
I found the session over the last 4 weeks filled me with immense enjoyment. I enjoy coming here. I look forward to coming on the first week and leaving. I was like, loved it quite a lot. It's got better and better.
Mae'r sesiynau yw'ch amdani ar gyfer pobl sydd wedi cael newidiadau i'r iaith, barnu neu sgiliau cyfathrebu oherwydd cyflwr niwrolegau.
Being isolated makes you get those on the edge of the conversations, and that theory is extended. Go out or regularly, and that's something more depressed. But having a group session such as this is not more confident to relate to other people, get to know other people, and to enjoy meeting other people.
The reason this project came about was I was looking for something in the community where people with communication difficulties could practice and generalise the skills they've been learning in therapy in a more naturalistic environment, an opportunity to build social networks and to just be part of something which was not our week-to-week therapy sessions.
A very positive impact on all the participants. They all seemed very keen to come back, anxious to engage when they were here. These guys so clearly wanted to develop their own skills. It's very rewarding to feel able to be part of that journey with them and just help.
Mae'r sesiynau drama symudiad eich wedi rhoi cyfle i aelodau i lanfod sgiliau cyfathrebu Mae'n amgylchedd diogel, can fi natur yn eich hyder, rwy'n o'r llys, a joio.
I don't attend that field. This is very good to be people and it's quite different. I enjoyed it immensely. So was definitely it offers. If it comes up.
One of the things that we did before the workshop started was to provide some training for the practitioners running the workshop in communication difficulties, how they present, and how we could adapt the session to meet the needs of the participants that would come in.
We've had to choose some of the more obvious quotes, scenes. The big concentration.
Being here and delivering these sessions and connecting with the participants made me realise that movement and dance, can be at the place it needs to be.
I had a stroke myself about 6 years ago, so I'm still actually recovering. I do know it takes an awful lot of time and effort to concentrate on something for a length of time that we're asking to. One or two things we see, and I think
We wanted, obviously, an opportunity for them to practice their communication skills, but more than that, we wanted to build confidence. We wanted people to be part of something and to participate in a community-based session. And many of the participants are not participating, they're not accessing community groups. Some of that is to do with the various communication difficulties. So we wanted this to be a stepping stone to build confidence and a stepping stone to be able to seek out other opportunities within their own community.
it's certainly been worth coming. Certainly been worth doing this. It's really interesting the challenges it's produced for me in making me address the fact that I must talk clearly. I must make the effort to talk clearly. And I was getting, before I started this difficult, those and before session, I was getting more and more lazy. But he didn't sit down and say nothing. And it is to make that effort to speak.
My approach Shakespeare Link, there is a community arts organisation. I wanted something that was collaborative and inclusive, and I know they have a good reputation for strong community projects. The Shakespeare Link are able to provide the artistic input and the workshop sessions and the ideas, and then I'm there as a speech and language therapist to support and to adapt the workshops to ensure that they're accessible for those.
These sessions give people an opportunity to get to know the plays better, to look more closely at the characters and their motivation. But best of all, gives them the opportunity to speak some of the most beautiful words in the English language. Wherever you're from, there's something that you can relate to in Shakespeare.
Mum's found it really difficult since her stroke to meet people without any problems in communication. And this has been a fantastic opportunity to meet people with similar needs and requirements and be supported using theatre as a medium of communication and to use Shakespearean text in this way. It's really innovative and fantastic for these various communication problems.
I thought it was difficult doing something, and it was turned out to be much easier. I enjoyed it, and the words I had trouble with using this in other people's company. It was difficult. It was good to put words to different that were in my head, coming out of my mouth, to sort it out and mind together, and getting out and finding other people who are having similar problems.
It's made me realise that language is more than just collection of words stuck together. It's language is communication essentially.
I think one of the toughest jobs as a speech and language therapist is to get generalisation. So for people to generalise those skills that we're teaching in therapy and to generalise them to their everyday encounters. This group is one step towards supporting that. It's trying to foster a more naturalistic environment but in a supportive way where people can practice those strategies and they're doing it.
It's an enjoyable session. There's a fun element to it.
Seeing everybody from session one and just seeing just how much they grew as a group and individually and really came alive with their creativity.
But I love how important each segment flowed into the other. Just making movement express what I was thinking, what I was saying. Helped. There's once tends to have a rather blank expression otherwise. You should get a chance to know what the other person's thinking.
I was worried because I was worried what can 3 sessions do? As soon as you start and then that momentum comes, it then finishes. And I was curious to know if it could be effective. If you look at how they responded to sort of things in week 1 and then in week 3, that invitation to stretch, and everyone was here. They weren't here. So I think you can see that everyone kind of they physically felt a bit more confident. It would be interesting to know maybe what that knock-on effect. I think, if you feel a bit better about what your body can do, does that kind of bleed into your everyday life then? I think it might. I hope it does.
By focusing on something else, different activity, and not sort of focusing on we're here to help you with your voice, that they become much more engaged, and it doesn't matter what level of difficulty, it can still be part of a collaborative speaking aloud. I think it's been very effective and it's having a lot of fun.
What do you think is important to achieve what we're trying to achieve here, to help people like me continue to communicate?
Been a really positive experience. We've had lots of really fantastic feedback, not just from the participants, but from other professionals working with them, and to see the confidence in particular grow and how that shapes and impacts on their communication skills. It's really good to see. This is the first time that we've looked at a project like this. It's the first time that we've done collaborative working with an outside organisation, and the first time that we've sourced external funding to be able to produce workshops. But it's been such a positive experience. We hope that it's all last.
Okay, there we go. So I'm sorry about the makeshift way of managing to show that to you. And to those online, apologies. I know it's not ideal when you can't see the main bit of the presentation. And if anyone does particularly want to view it, I'm more than happy to be contacted, and we can arrange some kind of Teams screening. Please just email me. I would love to share that video more widely. So in our last few minutes then, if we can get the slides moving again. Oh dear. I'm going to have a little discussion with you about the outcomes that we use to measure the effectiveness of the group. And then just a few points and words of warning. Obviously, this was a short number of sessions. We did a range of outcome measures because we weren't quite sure what we were going to see and what we were going to do, and what it was going to achieve. So we did use quite a few different outcome measures. We can't say that this workshop, we can't be black and white about it. It's not cause and effect. There are other things. It wasn't controlled for. There are other things going on in people's lives that could be impacting on these scores, but it's a starting point. It gives us some idea of what we can get to. If you want to be a bit more comfortable, I know I can see you straight in your next one there. Please feel free to go back for the next 5 minutes. Thank you. So, and one of the other things that we struggled with was that I couldn't find, there isn't really an ideal standardized validated measure of participation or well-being or confidence for therapy groups. It's really hard to find that perfect outcome measure. I haven't found it. I'm not sure that it exists quite yet. But if there is any feedback, then please do let me know. So these are the ones that we used. So the GAS, the Goal Attainment Scale. So a GAS is an individualized client-centered goals that the participants identified prior to the group. For some, they were devised specifically around group attendance, like they wanted to be able to initiate questions and conversations with other group members. For other people's, they were goals that were set previously in therapy, and the group was providing some naturalistic opportunities to practice. For example, we had a couple of people with Parkinson's whose voice would be quieter as a result of the condition, who wanted to be able to project their voice with enough volume that they wouldn't ask to repeat themselves. So we had a range of goals individualized to each participant, but all relating to speech, voice or communication. And the question that we asked ourselves, does the group provide a naturalistic setting to support carryover of skills taught in therapy? Well, yes, it does. 100% either met or exceeded their goals as measured by GAS. 2 minutes, okay. Confidence. So confidence, there was a mixed response with confidence. I think that's partly because we weren't using the right outcome measures. Self-reported questionnaires, well, there was an increase in confidence, but obviously they're not standardised or validated. So there does come with some issues there. And we did use something called the aphasia impact questionnaire, but the responses on that were mixed. So it did, yes, improve confidence in some situations or in some groups within, but not all. Did it engage participants in social activities? Yes, it did, and that was measured on self-rating questionnaires. And feelings of well-being, again, that was difficult to draw conclusions. On the self-rated questionnaires, we saw some improvements, but on the aphasia impact questionnaire, there was a mixed response, so we can't really bring conclusions to that. But it definitely increased interest in the arts, and I hope that the video demonstrated that in a way that comes alive more than the figures. This was a really interesting results that we had around levels of anxiety and depression, and it was actually quite surprising to me. So what it showed was change across 2 different measures. So we used the hospital anxiety and depression scale, which is a validated measure of anxiety and depression. And there's a 67% improvement in scores across 2 timeframes, pre and post groups, particularly a reduction in depression scores more than anxiety. And as I said before, we know that the risk of depression and anxiety is much higher in people with communication difficulties than the general population. So I think there's something in there, and that probably needs to be looked at in more depth next time. And we also use the EQ5D5L, which is a standardized, validated health-related quality of life measure. And again, on the domain to do with anxiety and depression and undertaking usual activities, which could include going about day-to-day things like groups, there were improvements. The other areas we didn't see so much improvement, but we wouldn't expect to, with things around mobility, self-care, washing and dressing, and pain and discomfort. So again, I think there's something in there that might need some further looking at. And then lastly, what next?
If you do need to leave for another presentation, then feel free, otherwise carry on.
Okay, this is my last slide. So what next? We did it was a testing groundwork grant that we got. It was a pilot, but we feel that there's a duty that we need to do something more. We need to expand this. We need to find a more sustainable model going forward. Funding for groups, you know, it's very time consuming and it's very time heavy. We need to find a way of integrating some of these sorts of participation and wellbeing groups a bit more broadly within our local health provisions, really, and making links with the community. So very much a whistle-stop tour. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have, and I'm more than happy to be contacted or Brad later for a bit more information if you want it. Thank you for listening and for sticking with us with the technical issues. Are there any questions?
I don't know if it might be a bit of a silly question, but you know, in the first group, I think they were mostly sort of men.
Yes.
Was there a reason for that?
Well, that's a good observation. So we had, predominantly, probably, I think it was around 70% of the participants were male. So there is an increase. There are more men living with neurological conditions than women. So there's probably just something that it's mirroring the condition. We had about 50% were stroke, 40% were Parkinson's, we had about 10% brain injury and other acquired brain injuries. So it's probably a reflection on that. but it was particularly interesting, particularly for the movement groups, because the arts practitioners were surprised because they very rarely get men come into movement and dance community groups. So that was a really nice positive.
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking. I thought it was really nice to see sort of more men included in the more creative side.
And they were, yeah, they were great.
Yeah,
They were absolutely great. Yeah. Are there any other questions or online questions? No?
how are people referred to this the workshop?
So it was it was invitation only. So they had to, the inclusion criteria, so they had to have been known to speech and language therapy services and received intervention for communication difficulties in the 12 months prior to the group starting. So they may have been discharged, but they were invited because they'd had recent input, because it needed to be a targeted health and therapy group rather than a more generic social group. It needed to have that therapeutic element. So yeah, it was invite only.
Have any of the participants then stayed with the Shakespeare Link group afterwards?
Not to my knowledge, and that I would love to see that happening. I'm not sure that there were enough sessions to build that confidence, and also, which I haven't gone into today, the logistical barriers of transportation and rurality. We had a massive part of our budget, 10% of our budget went on transport costs and taxis and getting people there. And even still, it was a huge logistical issue. So the barriers, I think, are wider than just not wanting to go or not having the confidence. Yeah.
I suppose it's an opportunity to maybe for the next phase to link in with, say, Dial-A-Ride.
We did.
Yeah.
We
Oh,
did.
so they
even still with the community transport schemes, trying to get a regular, and who knew, taxis, they all have school contracts.
Yeah. They do.
So trying to link in a group that was in a community setting at a right time that met people's needs, because they were traveling up to an hour to come, and then being able to get them there and back. It was unforeseen. Thank you, and I think you might have other ones to get to.